They looked at my second-hand dress, my sensible shoes, and the exhaustion etched around my eyes, and my daughter-in-law, Amanda, made a point of sighing, loud enough for her father to hear, as if the shame of my existence was a burden only she had to bear. But what they didn't know was that their contempt was the exact moment I stopped caring about their acceptance and started plotting my own justice. I knew then that the only way forward was to reclaim the dignity they had tried so hard to strip away, and I swore to myself that by the time I left the Wittman estate, the world they stood upon would be fundamentally changed, and it would be Elellanor, the matriarch herself, who would hand me the keys to the kingdom. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My life, until that icy December day, had been defined by quiet sacrifice, the kind that never makes the society pages of Greenwich, Connecticut, or registers on the radar of the Wittman family. I was Margaret Sullivan, a 64-year-old widow from New Haven, and my fortune wasn't measured in market cap, but in the years I spent on my feet working as a community nurse, tending to other people's needs, while my own savings account grew at a painfully modest rate. My husband, bless his soul, had passed 10 years ago, leaving me the modest but paid-off home that David, my son, had grown up in. David was my heart, a good boy, a kind soul, but he had fallen into the orbit of Amanda Wittman, and everything changed. The Wittman world was one of manicured lawns, inherited wealth, and rigid social expectations, a world where my small New Haven house and my nursing uniform were seen as social pollutants. Amanda's father, Richard, was the CEO of Wittman Industries, an old money empire built on some forgotten manufacturing success, and her mother, Patricia, treated me with an Arctic politeness that was colder than outright hostility. For years, I had been the ghost in David's marriage, excluded from their lavish holiday gatherings, relegated to brief, strained phone calls, and only invited for a quick, awkward breakfast when they visited David's father's grave. The message was always clear. You are not one of us, Margaret. You are a reminder of a life we have gratefully left behind. Then, the unexpected invitation arrived. A heavy, cream-colored card, embossed with the Wittman crest, requesting my presence at their annual Christmas gala. David had sheepishly explained it as a momentary lapse of judgment on Amanda's part, a way to save face with a nosy relative, but I didn't care about the reason. I saw it as a lifeline, a chance to finally, truly be accepted for David's sake. I spent days I couldn't really spare scouring the modest boutiques in downtown New Haven. I settled on an elegant, charcoal gray velvet dress, one that cost half a month's pension, but felt like armor. I practiced polite conversation in the mirror, rehearsing sophisticated responses to questions I knew would never be asked. I studied the nuances of high society, planning to fit in, to be invisible, to not embarrass my son. David had called me the day before, his voice tight with an anxiety that wasn't entirely his own. Remember, Mom, nothing political, nothing controversial. Keep it light. Just look the part. The entire effort felt like preparing for a military inspection, not a family Christmas party. But I was determined. I was going to pass the test. The day of the party, everything went wrong. A severe ice storm swept across Connecticut, coating the roads in a treacherous layer of black ice. My hair appointment was canceled, the salon doors frozen shut. My tailor called. The final adjustment on the velvet dress was impossible. I ended up styling my own hair, a simple, sensible bun, and the dress was a bit tighter than I would have liked, but I looked presentable, not Greenwich presentable, but Margaret Sullivan presentable. The storm intensified as I drove down I-95, the wipers struggling against the freezing rain. The drive that should have taken an hour stretched into 2, then 3, each mile an agonizing crawl through the gloom. I was running impossibly late, and the pit in my stomach deepened. I knew this would be used against me. Finally, I turned onto the long, winding private road that led to the Wittman estate. The houses were mansions, hidden behind towering stone walls, each one a testament to generational wealth I could barely comprehend. My small, practical sedan felt ridiculous next to the snow-covered wrought iron gates. I was just a few minutes from the main entrance when I saw the Mercedes. It was a classic, a pristine vintage S-Class, pulled over onto the narrow shoulder. No hazard lights, just a lone elderly woman standing beside it, her posture ramrod straight despite the driving sleet, looking utterly and completely stranded. My first thought, the conditioned, self-preserving thought, was to keep driving. I was already late, soaked, and nervous. Every nerve ending screamed at me to maintain the course, to save myself. But 50 years of being a nurse, a mother, a caregiver, won out. I couldn't leave an elderly woman alone on a treacherous road in a blizzard. I pulled my little sedan in front of the Mercedes, my engine ticking as I cut the power. The woman turned, and I recognized her immediately from a Society column photograph David had once shown me. Elellanor Wittman, Amanda's grandmother, the Iron Matriarch, the source of all the family's power. She was magnificent, even standing in the snow, wearing an elegant fur coat and a single, stunning diamond necklace. Her eyes, sharp and clear, fixed on me. "You're late for the party, aren't you, dear?" she asked, a slight, knowing smile playing on her lips. I stammered, apologizing for my intrusion, and asked if she needed a tow truck. She waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. The battery terminal is corroded. Car won't turn over. Richard's driver is probably stuck behind a fallen tree miles away." I knelt down, ignoring the icy slush seeping into my dress and soaking my sensible shoes. I remembered something my late husband, a mechanic on the weekends, had taught me, a trick for quick, emergency cleanup of battery corrosion. "Do you happen to have a can of Coca-Cola, Mrs. Wittman?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She looked at me, a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. "In the trunk. The diet kind." "But Margaret, dear, what in the world for?" I didn't explain. I took the can, shook it a little, and carefully poured the carbonated liquid over the crusty terminals. The acid in the soda fizzed, dissolving the white-blue corrosion on contact. A minute later, I wiped the terminals clean with an old rag I found in my own trunk. "Try it now, Mrs. Wittman." She slid back into the leather seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. She sat there, idling, watching me. I was disheveled, my dress stained with slush and battery grime, my hands black, but the car was running. She stepped out again, looking me up and down, not with disdain, but with a profound, assessing interest. "Margaret Sullivan," she said, pronouncing my name with a weight that none of the other Wittmans ever gave it. "You've just done what all the drivers in Greenwich couldn't. Anyone worth knowing will understand that you put kindness before vanity, and if they don't understand that, they're not worth knowing." She opened the passenger door of her sedan. "Now get in. You're coming with me." We arrived at the Wittman estate 20 minutes later. The place was a palace, lights spilling onto the pristine snow, a valet parking line of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces snaking up the drive. The moment I walked through the massive double doors, following Elellanor into the grand hall, the air went silent. The room was a sea of black ties and shimmering couture. And there I was, Margaret Sullivan, wearing a rumpled, stained velvet dress, my hair slightly askew, accompanied by the grand matriarch who was still wearing my husband's old rag on her shoulder, where she'd tried to wipe some sludge off my coat. The silence wasn't welcoming. It was the sound of 1,000 eyebrows raising in unison. Amanda rushed over, her face a mask of mortified embarrassment that she tried and failed to hide with a strained smile. "Grandmother, Mother, what happened?" And Margaret, "Oh my God, what are you wearing? Are you all right?" Her voice was thin, sharp, with social panic, not genuine concern. Richard, her father, a man whose every movement was designed to exude control, appeared next. He was visibly appalled. "Elellanor, what is the meaning of this? Margaret, you are disheveled. I think, perhaps, you should allow a maid to show you to a dressing room. Or better yet, maybe we can arrange for an early taxi." His suggestion wasn't an offer. It was a cold, dismissive command to disappear, to remove the inconvenient stain on their perfect evening. The social elite, their faces impassive, continued to stare, judging me, confirming every fear I'd ever had about my outsider status. This was the betrayal, not of an action, but of a complete, absolute, and total dismissal of my worth, despite the character I had just displayed. The cold judgment washed over me, a physical shock that stole the air from my lungs. But before the shame could take hold, Elellanor Wittman spoke, her voice cutting through the enormous room like a finely tuned violin, instantly commanding attention and silence. She turned to the room, not to me, her posture radiating an authority that made even Richard shrink slightly. "I believe," she announced, her voice resonating, "that you are all forgetting yourselves." This woman, Margaret Sullivan, stopped in a blizzard to help a stranger, something none of your chauffeurs, nor frankly any of you, would have dared to do. She got her hands dirty and fixed my car with a can of Coca-Cola, a piece of ingenuity that comes not from an expensive education, but from real life, from character. She reached out, placing a gloved hand on my shoulder, steadying me. She arrived, disheveled, yes. She arrived, stained, yes. But she arrived embodying the principles this family pretends to uphold: kindness, resourcefulness, and practicality. That's exactly the kind of thinking that built this family's fortune, the willingness to get your hands dirty when something needs fixing. Her public endorsement was not just a defense, it was a profound seismic shift in the social dynamic. Suddenly, I was not a social embarrassment. I was the heroine of a dramatic roadside rescue, the subject of the matriarch's glowing praise. Elellanor challenged the entire room on their superficiality, contrasting my selfless act with their obsession with appearances. The room, which moments before had dismissed me, now regarded me with a blend of curiosity and forced respect. My heart, which had been racing with humiliation, began to beat with a steady, cold resolve. I had come here begging for acceptance. I would leave with justice. Before the main course, I became, to my own amazement, the center of attention. Guests flocked to me, wanting to hear the story of the Coca-Cola car fix, an anecdote that represented a delicious break from the stale, predictable conversation of the Greenwich elite. I retold the story, focusing not on my embarrassment, but on the simple, practical nature of the solution, careful to highlight Elellanор's wisdom and dignity. She, in turn, kept me close, engaging me in conversations about community, volunteerism, and the responsibility of the privileged. Amanda and Richard watched from across the room, their faces etched with a growing, cold unease. They had brought me here as a token, a quiet embarrassment they could control, and I was, instead, becoming an unexpected, highly validated threat to their social equilibrium. The undercurrents of the Wittman family's business became evident in our discussions. There were tensions about the company's drift, its focus on quarterly profits over long-term values, and the general sense that they had lost touch with the community that had once been their bedrock. Elellanor steered the conversation constantly back to values, character, and legacy, all while staring directly at Richard. I realized then that I wasn't just an act of kindness to her. I was a symbol, a blunt instrument she was preparing to wield. The true climax, the true moment of my personal justice, came later in the evening. Elellanor led a small, select group, including Richard, Amanda, David, and me, into the estate's enormous mahogany-paneled library. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, and a fire crackled quietly in the enormous hearth. Elellanor walked to the fireplace, her back to us, and picked up a bronze statuette of a stern, bearded man, her late husband Harold, the supposed founder of Wittman Industries. She set it down hard, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "We are losing our way," she stated, her voice suddenly devoid of all warmth, hard and cutting like the ice outside. She turned to face Richard, her son, her eyes holding his in a painful lock. "You've all forgotten what this company was built on. You think it was Harold's vision, Harold's ambition, Harold's name on the incorporation papers. You are wrong." She paused, the silence stretching into an eternity, and the shock in Richard's eyes was unmistakable. "I didn't help build Wittman Industries. I am Wittman Industries. Harold was a figurehead. I faced gender discrimination in 1958. I had to hide my leadership, my genius for logistics, my financial strategy, behind my husband's name to secure the initial funding." She pointed to a tiny framed photo on the mantel, a young woman with a determined expression. "That was me. I founded and built this company from the ground up. I wrote every business plan, signed every major contract, and hired every key employee for 30 years. I am the true legacy. And, Richard, you have forgotten my core values." The revelation shattered the glass house of the family's narrative. Richard and Amanda were speechless, their faces drained of color, their entire identity built on a lie of inherited patriarchy. Elellanor looked at me then, her expression softening slightly. Margaret's actions tonight, her willingness to sacrifice her own comfort, to put a stranger's need before her own vanity, her practical, problem-solving mind, that, she declared, gesturing to me as if presenting a rare jewel, is the Wittman spirit, the spirit you have allowed to corrode, Richard, for the sake of profit margins. She did not wait for a response. She launched into a cold, calculated critique of the current leadership, exposing their lack of community connection and their drift from the company's founding principles. Then came the true stroke of genius, the moment she gave me the key to my future and sealed their fate. This company needs its values restored. It needs a connection to the real world, to real people, to the community we serve. Richard, you will remain CEO for now, but your board oversight will be much, much stricter. Effective immediately, I am establishing a new executive consulting role, the Director of Community Engagement and Values Implementation. She turned to me, her eyes twinkling. "Margaret Sullivan, I am offering you that position. It's a 6-month trial, $75,000 salary, with full executive status and a review for a permanent, high-ranking role at the end of the term. You will report directly to me, and your first task is to audit every one of our charitable foundations and community initiatives. You will make sure that every dollar we spend is working to improve lives, not just polish our image." The shock in the room was palpable, the silence broken only by Richard's sharp intake of breath. Amanda made a strangled, half-choked sound of protest. David, bless him, finally found his voice, a quiet, amazed, "Mom," Richard sputtered. "Mother, this is preposterous. She's a nurse. She has no executive experience." Elellanor just smiled, a victorious, cold, matriarchal smile. "She has integrity, Richard, something we seem to have run out of in the C-suite. And she knows how to fix things that are broken." I looked at my son, saw the sudden hopeful pride in his eyes, and then I looked at Amanda and Richard, their faces a mixture of fury and impotence. My moment of justice wasn't about revenge. It was about the profound restoration of my own value. "I accept, Mrs. Wittman," I said, my voice steady and firm. The contempt in the room had not just been silenced, it had been utterly vanquished. The fallout was immediate and devastating for them. The next morning, Richard called me, his voice a low, hostile growl, trying to negotiate me out of the position. I politely declined, explaining that my acceptance was final and that I looked forward to our first audit meeting. Amanda was forced to call me, the artificial sweetness in her voice replaced by a strained, desperate deference. She tried to suggest we go shopping for new executive attire, but I told her my choice of clothing was entirely my own. Elellanor had given me a weapon more powerful than money, true, undeniable power within their circle, earned entirely by my character. They lost control, they lost their ability to define me, and they lost the narrative of their own family's legacy. Elellanor, in a private meeting, later told Richard, "True wealth isn't just measured in financial statements. It's measured in how many lives you improve." He understood then that she wasn't punishing him for a quarter's earnings. She was correcting a lifetime of moral drift. 3 months later, I had moved out of my New Haven home, renting it out to a young nurse and her family. I bought a small, charming condo overlooking Long Island Sound, a serene, sunlit place where I could breathe. My new office at Wittman Industries was spacious, and my work, restructuring the entire foundation to focus on accessible community healthcare, was meaningful. I wasn't just accepted by the family, I was an essential pillar of their newly defined legacy. I saw Elellanor often. She was a true mentor, a wise, powerful woman who saw value where others only saw class differences. I never took the executive clothing allowance. I wore my own comfortable, sensible clothes, the ones that reminded me of who I was and who I refused to be. My life wasn't defined by their contempt anymore. It was defined by my own purpose. I had walked into that party seeking acceptance and walked out with a mission, a mentor, and my self-respect restored. I learned that the greatest betrayal is not what others do to you, but the betrayal of your own values by giving in to their definitions. I finally chose myself, my wisdom, and my kindness, and that, in the end, was the victory I truly deserved. Justice wasn't about destruction. It was about restoring the balance of my own worth and watching them realize the depth of their mistake was simply the sweetest, most satisfying consequence. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.